Hi, I'm Jeff Bloomberg. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at MGE. And this week's tip is going to be a continuation of my series on the top 6 reasons behind overhead problems. Now, if you missed last week's tip, so you know what the actual 6 reasons are, click this card here, that little button, and that'll take you to that tip. Otherwise, we're going to be picking up with reason number 1 this week, which is staff payroll. I would say in all the overhead sheets that I've looked at, staff payroll is the biggest point responsible for overheads for dentists that's going out of control. All right? So now if we're taking a look at this, the first thing we'd want to take a look at is what percentage of your collections should staff payroll be? The simplest way of looking at it is it should be 21%. 21%. Okay, now a couple qualifiers with that 21%. First qualifier is that 21% does not include the doctor owner or any associate doctors. It includes the rest of the staff, hygienists as well, the office manager, etc. Does not include the associate doctor or the doctor owner. The second qualifier is this does not include payroll taxes, meaning the taxes that you as an employer pay over and above the employee's pay. And I'm not an accountant or an attorney. My grandmother suggested I become that, but you gotta love grandma. Never worked out that way, but I'm not an accountant or attorney. But if you have questions on these things, I recommend that you talk to your accountant. In the United States, for example, we have FICA, which is Social Security, and Medicare. In Canada, they have things like the Canada Pension Plan and provincial health insurance, etc. So you'd add those things on top of the 21%. So now, let's take a look at this. The first thing you'd want to do is to take a look at, is your payroll too high? Is figure out what percentage of your collections your payroll actually is with those parameters that I just gave you, okay? So now, if you've never done this before, I have a real simple formula. We're going to throw numbers up on the screen. I'm going to try not to kill you with boredom here with numbers, but it's important that you at least know this as a business owner, okay? So first thing you do is you'd list out all your staff, and then you'd figure out what are you paying them on average per month, all right? Now, the one thing I'll tell you with employees who are paid hourly, because quite a few employees are, there's a big mistake normally made with this when people are figuring out payroll. If you pay somebody on average about $500 a week, and if I were to ask you, what are you paying them per month, 90% of you would say, oh, I pay them $2,000 a month. 500 times 4 weeks is, do my math right, is $2,000 a month. But it's actually not, because there are 52 weeks in a year, not 48. Okay, so if you actually want to figure out what you're paying an employee, let's say we take somebody who's making $500 a week on average, you'd multiply that by 52 weeks and you'd divide it by 12, all right, which you're seeing here on the screen. So what we come up with when we divide it by 12 is actually $21.66 per month that you're actually paying this person instead of $2,000 a month. Okay, so it's just something to keep in mind. You want accurate numbers when you're coming up with monthly payroll. And I would total up all my employees' payroll and average it out over 3 months. Then I would do the same thing with collections. All right, so let's say you total up your employee payroll and it comes to $12,000 a month. All right, then you take a look at your average collections and it comes to $40,000 a month. So now how do we figure out what your percentage is? It's very simple. Take $12,000 and divide it by $40,000. And that gives us 0.30, which is 30%. That's too high, based on the 21% number that I just gave you, okay? So now the next step that I would do is not just, you sit and you go, wow, my payroll's too high. The next thing I would take a look at, believe it or not, is if I'm paying people $12,000 a month, what is that 21% of? In other words, what should I be collecting in order to justify this $12,000 a month payroll? So how would you do that? Well, you take the $12,000 a month, you're seeing this here on the screen, you divide it by 21, and then you multiply it by 100. So in this case, we've taken our 12,000, we divide it by 21, and we come up with the number 574.42, or 571.42, sorry. Then we multiply it by 100, and we have $57,142.85. So now if you take a look at that, that is what your office, if you're paying people $12,000 a month, should actually be collecting, okay? Let that sink in for a minute. This isn't, gee, wouldn't it be nice collections? And it's not production either, it's collections, okay? This is what your office should be collecting to justify paying $12,000 a month, okay? So let's say this was you. You found yourself in this situation. You're paying 30% of your collections in payroll, and you should be collecting $57,000 instead of $40,000. What do? Do you fire a bunch of people? I mean, you can. I'm not a huge fan of it. I'm usually more of a fan of getting the office producing up to the point that it actually should be producing. Now, that's not to say that you won't ever let somebody go or things along those lines, but I'm more, as I said, I'm more angled towards pushing it to where it should be. Now, what you should do, we're gonna cover in my next tip. Yeah, sorry about that. Which is we're gonna pick up specifically the 4 things that make employee payroll go too high. Now, if you like tips like this, I always recommend, you'll notice a little button that's been up on the top left-hand side of my left, your right-hand side of the screen throughout most of this video, which is our subscribe button. If you subscribe to our channel, you get weekly updates with our new tips as they come out. And if you have any further questions about MGE, you can find us online at www.mgeonline.com or call us at 800-640-1140. Last thing I'll mention, in last week's tip, I mentioned that there are some forms that you can use as you go through these tips. They're still available if you look at the description for this video. Other than that, I will see you back in the next tip where we're going to get more into what drives payroll so high. See you then.